Hi everyone, my name is Keenan. I am a YouTuber, game designer, and a student. Today I'll be talking about how do games go viral, specifically making games for YouTube. So for today, I'll be talking about, number one, why you should care about this medium. Specifically, I'll be explaining the massive impact YouTube has made on the gaming industry in recent years. Then I'll be following it up with a short background in my personal history in the field. And then my bulk of my talk will focus on game design tips I'd recommend to game developers interested in approaching the medium, and how they can understand this by first understanding the system and then understanding how to design for that system. Next, I'll briefly go over live streaming and how it differs from YouTube. And then lastly, I'll go over how to contact YouTube or content creators specifically. So for starters, I have to emphasize that gaming on YouTube is big. In the top 50 most popular games on YouTube accrued over 120 billion views last year. And of that 120 billion views, 95% came earned by independent creators rather than being paid for by a publisher. That's a 19-to-1 ratio of free advertising to paid. Next, Google Analytics has found a 99% correlation between the views of a game during the pre-launch period to the post-launch period. This translates into some really effective marketing data that can be used to optimize the campaigns and future development priorities of that company. Let's say you release a trailer, highlighting different elements of a game before launch. These same elements will then generally get the same amount of views post-launch when you, launch the product. Lastly, the market for the game content is arguably the biggest market on YouTube. YouTube user PewDiePie proves this with his 27 million subscribers, dominating the charts as the #1 channel on the site. You can also see that over the last 4 years, advertising revenue on YouTube has doubled just about every year. So this is, showing no signs of slowing down. A full report on these sort of stats can be found on octoly.com if you're interested. Next, a little bit about me. I founded my YouTube channel, Criken2, about 6 years ago in 2008. I eventually partnered with Maker Studios in 2011, and over that time I earned about 500,000 subscribers and 130 million total video views. Last year I moved to LA to enroll in USC's Interactive Media and Games program so that I could start learning to develop games of my own. This year I've started consulting and working with a range of game companies, both indie and AAA, in developing sensitivities to the new media markets of Twitch and YouTube. I also worked on a student game project that was invited to Indiecade a couple weeks ago that won the Student Developer's Choice Award. So I've had some good experience in both sides of YouTube and game development. Now onto the bulk of the talk. I'll be sharing some tips and tricks on how to target the YouTube medium as a market for your game. Before we get into that, though, it's important to know that since this is such a rapidly growing medium and every game is different, whether or not each of these takeaways will be applicable to your current strategy will depend on the experience or the users that you're trying to target. These topics are more a list of guidelines than they are rules that you need to follow. Okay, so the first step to targeting YouTube is understanding the medium. And since the medium is composed entirely of the content creators, it's recommended that you start with them. The first takeaway I want to emphasize is that the YouTubers are entertainers at heart. They don't exist to cover your game like a member of the game's press. They are personality and will treat your content with subjectivity. The key here is that your game is rarely the focus of the YouTube video. Especially for the larger channels, your game is more of a platform by which these influencers can provide entertainment. It's slightly different for smaller channels, though. Since they don't have as large of a following to be self-sufficient yet, they often pick games to play that they know will earn more viewers. This makes an interesting landscape where channels often compete to be the next trendsetter or early adopter based on what content seems to be getting attention. While a large YouTube channel might start a trend, it's the smaller channels that propagate this trend and bring it to the masses. Now, since there's so much content on this medium, channels can only separate themselves by targeting distinct niches. It's important when regarding each channel to identify what about them separates them from the rest. If this style coincides with the experience your game promises or works well with, then chances are you'd be a good match for them. Let's say, for instance, I want it to be the guy that plays games with a Victorian-era British voiceover accent. Assuming there's a need in the market for that style of video and I've got enough content to justify it, I should establish a brand around that. Let's say your game is that of a British dinner party or something like that, and you would probably want to reach out to me because you know my style of humor, my style of content would coincide with the experience you're trying to give the player. And that would get you the best, more valuable content overall, as opposed to, going to a channel that, makes videos of Flappy Bird. And sure, they get a ton of views, but it's probably not going to coincide to the experience that you want the viewer to have. Next, it's worth talking about the different styles of content these channels tend to produce and what differentiates them. This information can inform what style you gear your game towards. The important thing to note about the YouTube formula is that it prioritizes viewer retention and regularity in determining channel relevance. This means the programming on each channel needs to provide regular content updates that engrosses its viewers in the majority of the video each time. Now, different channels achieve this goal with different types of programming. The main format of a lot of big video channels is that of a multi-part series, where the creator plays through the entirety of a game in multiple 10-minute segments. An example of this is the Game Grumps, who recently have blown up, and they play a variety of games, usually that have no correlation whatsoever, but they bring their own personality to it, and they play it in multiple parts, all about 10 minutes long, and the fans come to love them for their personalities and whatever they bring to each game, not necessarily for the game itself. The other common format is that of a tentpole, with fewer videos, maybe 2 or 4 a month, that are generally higher production value, but earn higher average views as a result. These videos don't need to be multiple parts because they're self-sufficient. They're independent pieces, kind of like an independent movie almost, that has an arc. You may be able to attribute an arc to it, and as a result, they earn more views because you can watch them in an isolated sitting, but they don't draw you to the next part in the same way that some of these other videos do. Both of these styles of content are suited for distinct games. So let's say you're playing Dark Souls. Dark Souls is a game where the gameplay, it's more about the environments you progress through. So that's better suited for, I would say, a multi-part system where you would have multiple worlds that the characters are progressing through and that you're watching them as they evolve, versus a game that's more kind of highlight driven, which would be more for the tentpole system and would have fewer videos, but each video making more views. How you design for that is what I'm going to go into now. So the first design goal that I would want to highlight is the ability for a game to elicit a reaction from the player. Since YouTube takes the interactive nature of games and boils it back down to a passive viewing experience, it's important to look at your game through the lens of the player's viewer rather than just the player. You can think of this as a third-person perspective if you'd like. As I mentioned earlier, creators are often looking for opportunities to apply their personality or unique spin on the content of a game by delivering these players with high-impact moments that allows them to shine in the content. This is a big reason why horror is such a popular genre on YouTube. It's the easiest content to play off and provides the viewer with a memorable but comfortable experience. Rather than suffering through the high-tension environment themselves, fans can watch their favorite web personalities squirm and scream in their place. As you may be able to tell, Schadenfreude is a very real thing on YouTube. So the first case of YouTube success that I'll be going over is Five Nights at Freddy's. For those of you that don't know it, Five Nights was an obscure little indie horror game that was launched on Desura in early August. A week or so later, it got picked up by several big YouTube channels known for covering unconventional horror games. After it was exposed to the large audiences of these YouTube personalities' fan bases, the game rocketed in popularity. Steam greenlit the project by the end of the next week, and it rocketed to the top of the charts on there as well. Now it's even got a sequel on the way and a mobile version that's top of the App Store. Now, it's hard to pinpoint any one factor that led to Five Nights' wild success, but to highlight a few, I'd say it was, clearly a very well-designed horror game. The bulk of the tension comes from the dread of when the animatronic monsters are going to strike, rather than from where or how. The game doesn't rely on a complex mechanic or premise. It simply places you in a chair, facing the fear, and says, do your best to keep them away. There's no moving, no looking away, no fighting back. There's no escape, and the audience loves it that way. The AI also has randomly generated paths, which makes every playthrough slightly different. This allows YouTubers to milk multiple episodes worth of content because it's different for each player/viewer. It's also got a very simple premise. The game takes place in a Chuck E. Cheese-esque setting where you have these animatronic monsters coming at you, and you can plop someone down that knows nothing about the game, and they'll get the gist of it just from watching someone play it. And that's another important thing I'm going to go into in a second. Moving on to the phenomenon that I like to call happy accidents. As a game designer, it's part of your job to plan for all the possible courses of action. When this fails, though, it's not always a bad thing. Discovering a glitch or an awkward moment may break the immersion for some, but for others, mainly YouTubers, it's an opportunity to personalize the content they create. These hidden gems give their discoverer a unique experience that they can own and share. These unusual encounters then have the potential to be picked up by the larger community of fans and given all new meaning. The example I'll use here is from Mario Kart 8, where one user captured a clip of Luigi drifting past an opponent while giving them an uncharacteristic death stare. This Luigi death stare meme caught on like wildfire and generated a whole genre of Mario Kart replay footage on YouTube. It even got picked up by mainstream media for whatever reason. As you can see, Fox covering this, breaking news story. The point is, humor on YouTube is huge, and even if it's at the expense of something you hadn't intended to happen, it's often best to let people have their fun, because you never know what good will come out of it. Okay, so the key for success, I would say, in this Mario Kart example, was that it hinged on unexpected emotions from established characters. Obviously, not all games can do this, because you don't have necessarily as big of a character IP as Luigi and Mario, but that does help if you can play with these conventions later on. Another factor that helped make this possible was the social sharing tools built right into Mario Kart 8. Nintendo in the past has been notorious for not giving much support for YouTube, but with this game, they actually built in some really handy systems that allowed the creators to record, edit, and upload all the content from the game seamlessly to the website. This decision is relatively cheap to make, but it allowed for a huge host of content to be produced for the site, basically free advertising for the game. More on the power of shareability in a minute, though. Next up is emergent gameplay, or as I call it, the gift that keeps giving. On YouTube, I'd argue it's objectively better to have a non-linear experience to a linear one. Allowing the player to roam around and discover bits of the experience at their own pace allows for so much more creative experimentation than simply following the path. Another way to think about it is that YouTubers don't want to tell the story of your game, they want to tell the story of them playing your game. One good example of emergent gameplay is the random encounter system of Skyrim. Most of the popular Skyrim videos on YouTube are made of compilations of unlikely encounters and how these encounters interact with the player/environment. Very few videos deal with the main storyline or how to beat the game. Players and viewers don't want to be fed a story, they want to discover it on their own terms. This can also be achieved in different ways with multiplayer games, as I will go into with DayZ here. Specifically, survival games like DayZ have proven the potential for this emergent storytelling. The important notes on DayZ's case is that there is no explicit narrative whatsoever. The player is simply spawned in an open field with little to no indication of where they are or how to survive. After the first time player's inevitable death at the hands of hunger, thirst, or a zombie, the player slowly learns the tricks of how to scavenge for materials and stay alive in this inhospitable world. Once you're able to survive the environment, though, the real interesting part kicks in. And that is, you are one of many in this world, and all are struggling to survive, no matter what the cost. Player interaction is the wild card of DayZ and the cause for all success on platforms like YouTube. To a creator, each life in DayZ is a narrative that can be shared with their viewers. Each random player encounter is a tense exchange as both individuals are focused on preserving their own well-being. This deep role-playing has given way to a serious moral decision-making events, such as keeping a hostage, robbing new players blind, or avenging the death of a friend. All these interactions between colliding characters and storylines make for great YouTube content and explain in part why open world survival is so popular right now. As you can see, just in top rated videos, they all have to do with in some form of reacting to a player and either taking advantage of them or helping them. And especially in a game as unforgiving as DayZ, there's a whole YouTuber that's made his living on being this shining knight that goes through and personally helps all these people in need. And it's pretty interesting what sort of stories come out of that. So the last idea is that of contextual independence. The core of contextual independence is crafting an easily shareable experience. On YouTube, most viewers watch between 2 to 3 minutes on average before clicking away to new content. It's the responsibility of the YouTuber to keep their viewers engrossed on the content for as long as possible. But that can only be achieved if your game is accessible to them. If your game requires volumes of preliminary lore or instructions explaining, it'll most likely alienate the average viewer discovering it for the first time. To get around this, it's important your visual representation of things such as cause and effect or player action be intuitive and recognizable. Your game doesn't have to be a beautifully photorealistic game to get views on YouTube, as Five Nights at Freddy's and Minecraft have proven. It's most important your game is presented in an easily recognizable way. Be this through a unique HUD or stylized art is up to you. Your game will also be more shareable if it has more opportunities for short, positive experiences. This may sound broad, but if you think about it, Minecraft presents the player with all sorts of very short, positive feedback experiences. For example, you are building a house with your friend or discovering a new mine system. YouTubers thrive off these bite-sized entertainment moments because it's stuff like this that they can make self-sufficient videos that have a positive takeaway, but still tell a larger story that you can keep coming back to for a multi-part series. Of course, I end my examples with the best case scenario of Minecraft. Minecraft is the single most popular game on YouTube, grossing over 30 billion views. It achieves this by appealing to an absurdly large audience. Because the game can be played in either survival or creative mode, it has two unique formats of content built right in from the get-go. Some channels will highlight the survival mode and make a series out of collecting resources, going on adventures with friends, or creating a fantastical fortress that viewers can appreciate and explore. Another huge benefit is that Minecraft is easily moddable. Since the game already has a completely free-form sandbox function, it's become a natural experimentation tool for those wanting to create game experiences of their own. What this has done essentially is make Minecraft a medium of its own for new game modes and experiences. Some of these mods even use the IP of other games, as you can see. Five Nights at Freddy's is over there. All these unique mods allow the YouTubers to be a curator of popular Minecraft content, as well as build value for their own brand by just simply releasing entertaining videos. Thirdly, Minecraft is available just about everywhere. It can be played with a very low-end PC, Mac, Xbox, or even some phones. This has made the barrier to entry pretty much non-existent for it, and means that if a YouTuber uploads a video of it, there's no question of what am I looking at, where can I get it. This helps because Minecraft is, at its core, a collaborative environment. Collaboration is a huge tool creators use to produce unique content. In Minecraft, these creators can build an adventure with another YouTube friend or even craft a whole world populated by fans. The opportunities are seemingly endless, and that's why there's still so much content dedicated to Minecraft today. It's also got its own way to elicit a reaction from the player with the form of the creeper, which I talked about earlier. So, real briefly, what about live streaming? YouTube and Twitch own huge portions of the video game market, but how are they different? Well, to begin with, I personally believe Twitch is more empathy-based than YouTube. Watching a live stream means experiencing the game in real time with the entertainer. There's no hiding behind editing or script. What you see is what you get, and most live stream viewers love the feeling part of the action. This also means this form of content is slower paced as viewers have a longer retention rate. On YouTube, only having a minute or two to capture the user's attention and convince them is a tough thing to do. But on a live stream, viewers generally stick with the stream for a lot longer to get more of a complete idea of how the game is played as opposed to individual cherry-picked moments that the YouTubers can do. Yeah, so YouTuber can cut together highlights or lowlights to tailor the audience's reception of content, but with Twitch, it's a much more honest, straightforward representation. But it's also true that Twitch streams don't accrue the same views as on-demand YouTube videos do. So that's a trade-off you have to accept. Most Twitch streamers also use the system because it allows for persistent fan interaction and involvement. These interactions are usually used to the ends of earning donations, but sometimes also play a role in how the player plays the game. Let's say you're taking a poll on do I go left or right. That can change the game and give the viewer a feeling of being able to input the system. This is done in this new phenomenon. An example of this is Twitch Plays Pokemon, which there was a talk earlier today by Alex Leavitt. But this is an amazing example, I think, of where gaming is heading, where it's almost like a crowdsourced entertainment field, where you have viewers that are actively able to affect the system and create the experience that they want to watch. So with Twitch Plays Pokemon, there was a bot in the Twitch chat that was reading input from the players and then changing the game, like literally controlling the character based on what the chat was telling it to do. This sort of stuff is, I think, going to only grow in the future, and any game that really taps into using an audience will have as a successful time as Twitch Plays Pokemon. Twitch is also great for esport, like commentators and hotspots. Most esport games do really well on there because you treat it like watching a sports broadcast, and that's how the medium has kind of been growing. It's also got persistent communities because it's such a longer experience on Twitch than on YouTube. Communities grow more freely out of the chat rooms, out of the fan bases that result. And it's also, there's a sense of a shared struggle. Like you're struggling through the game with the player or with the other chat members, and this has a lot, it helps build the community as a result. And now finally, working with creators, how do you contact them? Mike Rose ran a great survey last year on how to contact YouTube talent on Gamma Sutra, so I would recommend you check out his full representation there. The important thing I will highlight, though, is that YouTubers often watch other YouTubers. So don't feel the need to always target the big fish when trying to get your game coverage. It's often better to target your niche with a smaller channel that will do your game justice than to force a poor fit than a large one. Also, I can confirm that personal contact via email and Twitter is always the best way to get in touch. And that is my presentation. Thank you for listening. I will ask that. This is my first GDC talk. If you found the information helpful or valuable, if you could leave me a nice review in the survey that you should be getting emailed, that would be really kind. Also, I'll be doing Q&A. I guess I have a little bit of time now, but also in the wrap-up room across the way if you want to follow up with anything specific. So, yeah. Any questions?
You talked about Twitch Plays Pokemon, and a big part of that movement was people creating a story to explain the actions of the player had while they were all inputting on that. How did that improve retention? How did that build that community?
I think story is one of the best ways a community can be born from. And, while on YouTube, the story is usually created in a one-sided way from the personality that's playing the game. In an example like Twitch Plays Pokemon, since it was a crowdsourced game, it's also a crowdsourced story. And, everyone is experiencing the story together. And I think it does, people try and make meaning out of every action. That's part of the fun of games, is you can add your own meaning to the content you're playing instead of just watching it. So I think that's a perfect example of how it is better fit for the Twitch, the multiplayer market.
Do you have any tips or special consideration advice of single player versus multiplayer games? Especially if your multiplayer game sort of not necessarily requires, but sort of is heightened if the players know each other. Because YouTubers are usually a single individual or like sometimes groups, but...
Yeah, I think you'd actually be surprised with how many YouTubers bring their friends along to play the game with them, but don't necessarily make it seem that way. Like they probably play with the same group of people that they know they can rely on for good feedback, good funny moments, good they're good to play off of. And I think like you said, that is a big consideration for a lot of YouTubers. A lot of them cover almost exclusively multiplayer content because they kind of fall in this backbone of having a powerful friend base or a community that they play the games with. With single-player games, kind of like Five Nights at Freddy's, it is a singular experience. It's a personal one where it's just you in the game and the fans are watching. And so to tap into that, I would say emergent kind of procedurally generated stuff allows for replayability and having something new and surprising happen each time is kind of what spurs that along. But yeah, there's tons of different ways to go about it.
Hey, thanks. Great talk for a first talk, especially, by the way. Have you seen any examples of games built specifically for these kinds of use cases? Because so far it really seems to be this kind of like serendipitous kind of setup.
Yeah. Funny enough, I don't want to go to this example every time, but Goat Simulator is the sort of game that, there was no market for that aside from the fact that the internet is a thing that, wanted something funny to laugh at, ragdolling everywhere. And it does show that, if you just fully embrace the silly and don't try to tack on some greater meaning to things, there is a market for that. And I'm not saying that's the way you should make all of your games. And, I think people would get sick of it pretty fast. But that is an example of a game, I think, that identified, people like the over-the-top, and we're just going to give it to them in its full force without any, being abashed by it in any way. So,
cool. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Anyone else? Or are we good? Also, these are my social media, so if you want to get in touch with a more personal question or a follow-up about the presentation, then feel free to do so. Twitter, email is the best way to reach me, but that's my channel if you want to check out my videos, see what sort of style content I come out with, and my LinkedIn if you are more business related. So, thank you.